The member from Thornhill.
Thank you, Speaker. And Speaker, the pension issue is coming to a head with a vote shortly, and it's not a new one in this House. It's not a new one for any of us, and it has implications more than ever now on a variety of levels for people across the province, for people indeed across our entire country. And there are a variety of solutions that are being proposed, but there's nothing simple. And this bill, taken on its own, doesn't solve the problem. It addresses a piece of the problem, and this is a problem that is unfolding before us. Now, if you take a good look at me, and I'll look right at that television camera so the folks at home can participate. If you take a good look at me, you can see by my boyish good looks that I'm not a day over 55. That's what it looks like, but it's not true, Speaker. I've passed Freedom 55. And as I have stated in this House before, I know you're surprised. Without any defined benefit pension plan, I have no defined benefit pension plan. I'm not whining about it. It's a fact of life for people in this House. It's a fact of life for 70% of people in Ontario. There is no defined benefit pension plan. So I share this more as a fact than some elevated position or somebody who believes that he is somehow or other entitled, because I'm not any more entitled than the other 70% of people who have to fend for themselves going forward. The other very important fact that has to be seriously considered is that we're all living longer. Now, I just said that I've passed 55. I'm 63 years old. My first memories of my maternal grandmother, who was the only grandparent I ever met, was when I was 5 and she was 63. And she was a little old hobbled lady with those funny shoes. 63 was very old. Today, I'm not very old. And I expect to live another 20 years, and if I'm lucky or unlucky, depending on how it works, maybe 30. Don't you say it. I know what you're thinking. Living longer, definitely. But are we saving? Are we saving for that greater longevity? And the answer is that most people are not. They're not for a variety of reasons, not least because it's almost impossible to save. First of all, we grew up in a culture where we needed instant gratification, so people spend their money more or less from hand to mouth. And now we live in a culture where a lot of us don't have that opportunity anymore to buy the things that we want. We're just spending it on things we need, and we're exhausting it. This is a national problem. It's also a provincial problem, and it is an individual problem. We are living to 80, to 90. And most people have not had the foresight to think, well, you know, I am going to live longer, so I'm going to have to save. And it's my belief, and it is our party's belief, that ultimately the answer to this lies within the private sector, not the public sector. We all know that the private sector has the vision and the creativity to accomplish what government will not. We could always come up with an easy way out. And the example would be, well, you know, we'll just double the benefits of the Canada Pension Plan. And a lot of people say, well, why can't we do that? It's the government's money. There's no such thing as government money. The government's money is your money. It's my money. It's all of our money, and it doesn't come off a printing press because we happen to think maybe it's a good idea to double Canada Pension Plan benefits. If we were to do something like that, that money comes from you. It comes from taxpayers. And if it's not you who's the direct beneficiary of a doubling of the Canada Pension Plan, then it's you who are paying increased taxes that you certainly cannot afford to make sure that those of us who are going to form the largest cohort age-wise in the province as of 2017, more people will be over 65 than any other cohort. We don't have the tax base that can afford to pay us the kind of money that would be required to double the Canada Pension Plan. So it sounds easy, but it isn't. And we're forgetting an important question. Where is this money going to come from? I'm getting the time sign here from my friend, but I have some more to say. Speaking of the private sector, I must speak to the growing disconnect between the private sector and the public sector as it relates to pensions, specifically with the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan. Speaker, there is a line item in this year's budget where there was a $500 million contribution from general tax revenues to sustain the fund. Let's face it, most businesses are not able to participate or even operate in this way. Once upon a time, in my own life, and probably I venture in the lives of most people here who have ever worked in a corporate environment, the defined benefit pension plan was part and parcel of what you did. When I was 18 or 19, just got out of university, I went to work for a company, now defunct, called Standard Broadcasting. Big company, controlled by the Argus Corporation, which became Hollinger. And I say this by way of point of interest. Fellow at the top was a guy named Conrad Black. You may have heard of him. Guest of the U.S. government for a little while. He was my boss. Not then, but ultimately. And the first thing that I had to do was fill out an employee card and sign my defined benefit pension plan card. And when I was unceremoniously bid adieu from that company some years later, they handed me a great big check that was the proceeds of my pension fund to date, but I couldn't cash it. That was a good thing. It went into a pension fund, which forms part of what I've saved over the course of my life. And fortunately, I've had some foresight. I don't know if I've had enough foresight to not be able to work at this point. Most people don't. I've mentioned that. My point being that that was then and this is now. We don't sign defined benefit pension cards anymore unless we're members of the public sector. The public sector is the new elite. 30% of the population has pension benefits that are in defined plans, and most of those people work in the public sector. So some small businesses may have a defined contribution plan, similar to what we have here at Queen's Park. And that's a plan where the business contributes an amount towards an RRSP, and the employer gets to match it. We know that the private sector world is moving in that direction, but this is not the case for the public sector. People in the public sector can retire with various factors in their mid-50s. And I've mentioned that I'm in my 60s. Many people here are. Some of us work here. I would say that I do because we like the idea of public service. Some of us still work here because we have to. And that's the case across the board. In the world of business. So I'd like to, I know I have a lot more to say, but I have a couple of colleagues who also want to speak, so I'm going to withdraw from the debate at this point and simply say that this bill does not make any provisions for the 60 to 70% of Ontarians without any pension. It simply addresses people who have pensions now. So, as usual, the government has forgotten to take into consideration most Ontario taxpayers in this bill. And going forward, we have to make provisions for more pension benefits for everybody out there, and that will be a function of the private sector. Thank you, Speaker.